The Andy Poland Show.
We got to go after this with everything we got, thinking they're going to come with everything they got.
I'll start off by saying I'm bored, I'm broke, and I'm back.
The Andy Poland Show on ESPN 630 starts right now.
1 week after Dan Quinn said to his team after a close loss to the Denver Broncos, "We lost, but we're no longer lost." Have you ever seen a Washington team as lost as it was yesterday in Minnesota? They may have found their way last week, but this week they got lost again. And there was no ways to bail them out. And right now they're staring down the barrel of a 12-game losing streak to end the season. It's already at 8. They are underdogs at New York next week to play the Giants. And if they lose that game, that's 2 against Philadelphia and 1 against the Cowboys to close out the year. It is just hard to get your head around this, that this has actually happened after the magical year where they make it to the NFC Championship game. All that, talk in the preseason, we're not going to be the Houston Texans and slide back. And the Texans, made the playoffs in C.J. Stroud's second year. This is really hard to understand, other than, of course, they've had a lot of injuries for sure. There's also the Jaden Daniels story, and I'm not jumping on with all the panicky people on Twitter. Oh, RG4, bail when you can, get rid of Dan Quinn, get rid of everybody. Everybody's got no. These kind of years happen from time to time, and it probably should have happened last year. That's really the normal progression of teams. They're coming off a horrible group that just totally mismanaged the draft. And one thing happened after another, a lot of lucky breaks. Jaden Daniels turned out to be better in his first year than you could have possibly imagined. And they went all the way to the NFC Championship game. This year, the pendulum swung back the other way. And, there are deeper issues that got spackled over last year, because Adam Peters, I thought, did a very good job in free agency, bringing in older players. And maybe they erred and tried to squeeze another year out of him. Bobby Wagner can't cover anybody out of the backfield anymore. He makes a bunch of tackles and still a hard-driving player. Didn't practice this past week because of a knee injury and went out and led the team in tackles, all those things. Zach Ertz, who was tremendous in the year that he played last year and has been not as good this year. Now looks like his season is over and probably his career. He suffered what appears to be a torn ACL in the game. Dan Quinn even said after the game that it is a serious knee injury. And when a coach says that, he pretty much knows the story. So they're a one-legged man in a butt-kicking contest right now, and there are really no more butts to kick. They were officially amazing that it takes a 3-10 record to do this, but now they are officially out of the playoffs with yesterday's 31-0 loss. And, shutouts are hard. They're hard to achieve, and they're hard to be a victim of. The last time was 2019 when a very motivated Kyle Shanahan came here and shut out Washington 19-0 on a rainy day at FedEx Field. That, of course, he was part of the whole Shanahan crew that now is sprinkled throughout the league, having success as head coaches. It happened then. I'll tell you, it happened to Joe Gibbs in what was his best year in his second go-round. They lost 36-0 to the Giants, somehow resuscitated themselves, got to the playoffs, won a playoff game. That ain't happening this year. That's officially over with yesterday. And as you look at everything that went down, and we'll get to the stats, it's hard to imagine that a team that had looked as bad as Minnesota had, looking as good as they did yesterday. I mean, this is a team that was 30th in the league in first down conversions. They converted their first 6. They went 6 for 6 on their first conversions. J.J. McCarthy, who was on his way to Busville, according to a lot of people, like, oh boy, Vikings really made a mistake here. Look at this. His 54% completion percentage, worst among NFL starters, and his 57.9 passer rating placed him in an all-time bust territory, ranking worse than every other quarterback selected in the first round since 2000. So he has become, and we're talking, Jamarcus Russell territory here. Jamarcus Russell, in my mind, is the biggest bust in NFL history, number one with the Raiders, and was flushed out of the league in like 3 years. This is from the Washington Times, suggesting that he was on his way to that. And what does he do to Washington yesterday? He just rammed it down their throats. He was 16 of 23 for 163 yards. That's not a lot of passing yardage, but they didn't need it because they were just chewing up it in chunks on the ground. And he had 3 touchdowns and a passer rating of 129.2. And the elephant in the room, and Barry Zerluga addresses this in a column today. I'll get some of the highlights of that. Jaden Daniels, before he went out with an elbow injury, not an injury, but a pain when he landed on the elbow, trying to do what he's got to learn not to do. And he threw an interception into the hands of Andrew Van Ginkel. And Van Ginkel is so good that if you see him, you probably oughtn't throw in his direction. But as he pursued him, cornerback Isaiah Rodgers knocked Jaden Daniels to the ground. And he landed on that elbow. Wince came out. Now, I'll get to whether he was taken out as a precaution or benched. We'll kind of parse the words of Dan Quinn on this, but it sounds to me like it's pretty close to a benching. You can't say benching for Jaden Daniels, but it kind of sounds like that. Anyway, here's how Quinn opened up his news conference. I was wondering what he was going to say because he kind of gave us last week in the Denver game no medals, not a no medals for trying scenario, I should say. He stopped short of saying moral victory, but he was kind of saying close to a moral victory in that they lost, but they were no longer lost. What was he going to say? And I think he said exactly what he had to say.
Oftentimes you stand here after a loss, you try to find, the something good that you wanted to point to, as hard as that is. But tonight, honestly, I don't. What I told the team was I thought we took a step forward last week, and tonight I thought we took 3 steps back. And we didn't find our rhythm and let them live into theirs. So tonight, to me, none of it was acceptable. It's 4 division games in our season, and it is an absolute must that we recapture that forward progress that I saw in the last week, because we absolutely did not have that tonight in all 3 phases, all the way through it. So give you an update on Jaden. Obviously fell on his elbow, was questionable to return and could have. It was my decision to sit him out. As a team at this point, we were off and felt like that was the right call for us to go. Certainly offensively, I liked what the first drive looked like. We missed on the touchdown, but those are the moments that we've got to make it and find our space to go. And then one injury update that I wanted to hit you with is early signs say a serious injury for Zach Ertz. And that's hard, man. This guy is one hell of a competitor in every way. And, to see the frustration and emotion with that, all of us are feeling that. I'll have the imaging tomorrow, but I wanted to give you that update from an injury standpoint.
Yeah, it certainly appeared that Zach Ertz tore his ACL, put a big brace on him. And anytime you see a player taken off on a cart, 9 times out of 10, it's a season-ending injury, and they move on without a safety valve, a very dependable receiver for Jaden Daniels. Now, he did mention that it was his decision to keep him out of the game. Said they were off. But remember, when he threw that pick, it was only 14-0. I mean, theoretically, they could have gotten themselves back in the game. If they're battling for a playoff spot, which they are no longer and really realistically weren't yesterday, it would seem that you would put him back in. And if you saw the sideline shots of him, they cut the brace off his elbow. And when he was told he wasn't going back in, he threw his helmet. He was not happy about that, and Quinn admitted that. But this addresses something that's a bigger issue with this team right now, because with all the losing, we've been able to say, at least I've been able to say, well, at least they know they have the quarterback for the future. And I still believe that. But the signs that we're getting lately are, not so sure. Now, listen to what Dan Quinn said when he was asked about taking Jaden out of the game.
He's upset, but no, I didn't. It was just my call where we were at, and just thought we were off, as a team. And so I felt like, hey, this is the right call at this moment. It wasn't anything other than that. Like, I just felt like, man, we were off as an entire group, offense, teams, defense. And I thought this is the right call at this time, and let's regroup it and see what we can do.
Well, you say you're off, but again, it's only a 14-0 game. Teams can score quickly in the NFL, and games can turn. We've seen that. The decision to keep him out. Now, maybe it's related to the Seattle game where he shouldn't have been in the game and certainly shouldn't have been running like he did. Maybe there's that. But I think there's also an element of benching here, which is, somewhat alarming with a guy who set the league on fire last year. Now, he did not say, and maybe, after a night to think about this, maybe he'll say, yeah, we're going to play it safe and shut him down for the rest of the year. But the intention sounds like if Jaden is cleared to play next week against the Giants, he's going to play.
It's an important development time for him. Like, there's no zero risk game. We try to manage that. But for the development point of it, it's important. It was my decision to sit him. I just felt we didn't hit our space to be close like we wanted to be. I thought he had a really good, week, 2 weeks really practice, John. And so having the guys come back, I felt like, all right, this is another chance to take another step forward. And so when we didn't today as a team, I think all of that was a contributing factor, not one position or one play.
Well, this leads to this column from Barry Zerluga of the Post, who was there yesterday at U.S. Bank Stadium. And he says, this is the lead, he says, even before Jaden Daniels was obliterated into the U.S. Bank Stadium turf Sunday, it was apparent something was, what's the right word, off, which you heard Dan Quinn use several times there. In his second season, he is still unquestionably the team's star. But wait, if he hasn't played like a star, and if he just got hurt for a fourth time, can we really use the word unquestionably? Based on what I saw last year, I would say yes, especially with the ceiling that he has. He is only a second-year quarterback. And if you're watching the game yesterday, Drew Brees was calling it. Drew Brees is a Hall of Fame quarterback. He's not quite eligible, but as soon as he's eligible, he's going in as a first-ballot Hall of Famer. Well, Drew Brees was taken by the San Diego Chargers as the first pick of the second round. He sat behind Doug Flutie as a rookie, got to play in his second year, was pretty good, but was so bad in his third year that they took, as you remember, Eli Manning, number one, and when the Manning family said, no, we're not going to San Diego, they still got a quarterback. They got Phillip Rivers, who took them through like the next couple of decades. But the fact that they had a quarterback who had shown signs of being very good and was only taken in the second round, it wasn't, it was high in the second round, almost a first-round pick, that they were bailing on him, and which obviously proved to be a mistake. And then in the rookie year for Rivers, he reported late, hold out. Things were different the way they did contracts then. And by the time he got there, it was Brees' job. And Brees played well, but then got hurt in the last game of the season, and they weren't sure about his shoulder. Like, it could have been, they thought maybe a career-ending shoulder injury. In fact, the Miami Dolphins were so concerned about it, they didn't sign him. They proving to be one of the really big mistakes they made with Nick Saban as coach. If they get Drew Brees, maybe Saban never goes to Alabama. But all that, that was a factor, and so it was a no-brainer at the end of that year that with the doubts about Brees, you don't give him a contract extension. I think he did play under the tag his final year, and then you move on and you make Phillip Rivers the quarterback. So, because there are doubts creeping in with Jaden Daniels in year two, and a lot of it is injury-related for sure, doesn't mean he can't right the ship and stay the course. And, I guess if the Chargers had it to do all over again, they would have stuck with Drew Brees, but they didn't. More from Barry. He says, as the final 4 games of the season approach, the piece of the puzzle that seems most important in connecting all others hasn't even played 4 games in a row this year. What's more surprising is that when he has been healthy, he simply hasn't played well. Daniel's rookie year was mesmerizing, appointment television. His sophomore year has been, dare we say, kind of meh. And then he talks about, when he was knocked out with the chasing down of Andrew Van Ginkel. That's something he's got to learn. You can't do that. I mean, even if he catches up to Ginkel, I don't want him tackling him. Ginkel's a safety / linebacker. He's bigger, fat, and not as fast, but bigger. You don't want, whatever he weighs, 205, Jaden Daniels, hurting himself making a tackle. That's not what you want to do. And then, as Barry points out, only the 7th appearance of the season. The last 3 times he's played, he's left with injury. And then the numbers. Now, the numbers don't seem to be as earth-shattering as you might think, but if you look at him closely, it's clear that he's not the same quarterback when he plays this year that he was last year. Now, he's been in and out. That, I think, has something to do with it. But his offensive line, you could argue, has been better and has been healthy this year. I mean, they've got a Pro Bowl tackle in Laramie Tunsil. They've got a very good offensive line, and these are the numbers. From last year, after going yesterday 9 for 20 for 78 yards against the Vikings, Daniels is completing 60.6% of his passes at 6.7 yards an attempt. Last year, he connected on 69% of his throws at 7.4 yards per attempt. So his passing percentage was almost 10% better last year, and yards per attempt also up almost a yard per pass. And a year after averaging 52.4 yards rushing per game at 6 yards a carry, he's down to 39.7 with just 4.8 yards a carry. So his rushing total is down 12 yards a game, which doesn't seem like that much, but over the course of the average, if you let's say you multiply the games by 10, that's a significant number of yards. And per carry, big difference between 6 yards a carry and 4.8 yards a carry. And I would say the eye test would also tell you that beyond the numbers, he hasn't looked as good. And there have been too many 3-and-outs. Remember those stretches where they didn't punt? Tressway punted 3 times yesterday, 3 or 4 times. So that's changed a lot too. And then going for it. They go for it on 4th down. They still do that. Yesterday on 4th down, they were 1 for 3. Minnesota was 2 for 2 and 6 for 11 on 3rd down. So that's another part of the picture here. And then, Barry talks about the number of losses that they've had, 8 straight, which matches Ron Rivera on his way out the door in 2023. And he concludes the column by saying, when Jaden Daniels does play, will he ever be the transcendent figure who uplifted an entire franchise? He has 4 more games this season to try to answer that. I would say to Barry, I think this is such a lost year. I don't know how much you can judge him on with the way he plays the rest of the year, but you'd like to see more of a spark than you've seen in the first 13 games of the year. And that's where the doubt is starting to creep in. But, Twitter is always an overreactionary space. So you're always getting these people. That's it. We've seen it. Done. Dan Quinn. Yeah, last year was fun. Okay. He faded in Atlanta. He's fading here. See you later. Adam Peters. Yeah, fine job year 1. But, oh, boy, did he blow it this year. No. Grab a Snickers. This is not going to be a blow-up situation. Now, if they lose out this year, they lose their final 12 games, and they turn in the 2026 season a 4 or 5 win year, then you got to start talking about it. But it's way too early to do that. Way too early. And it's way too early to even I would disagree, as smart a columnist as Barry is, I would say what he wrote is just a little bit, in my mind, overreactionary. He may disagree, but I think that you got to look at the long-haul picture of this, and you also have to look at the way we used to develop quarterbacks, and that it would take some time. Steve McNair was a first-round pick of the then Houston Oilers, I think, before they moved to Nashville. He didn't play at all his first year. Steve McNair became an outstanding quarterback. And, Jaden Daniels played right away. There was some debate whether they should do that or not. Mariota was certainly ready to go. Mariota played when needed, and this year he's been needed more than last year. But I just think the panic that is set in is a little bit premature. Yeah, this is a horrible year. And, it was a mistake to come back with Joe Witt as the defensive coordinator. But off-season, you flush out some of the older veterans. Their salaries come off the books. and you load up on defense. You get as many good defensive players as you can. This is a bad defense right now. And if Dan Quinn decides to call the defensive signals, okay, I wouldn't be in favor of that. But find a more competent defensive coordinator. I think things look a little bit different. But you have Terry McLaurin's coming back next year. You see what a difference it makes when he played, not yesterday, of course, but last week. And you have an offensive line that is good. I think you give Laramie Tunsil what it takes to re-sign him. In fact, he got the big boost from Cliff Kingsbury at his news conference this past week you got to pay him. He's going to get paid a lot of money. And then you'll find a running back. They've gone running back by committee. Maybe a more reliable running back or a back who can get 20 carries a game. Something like that. But again, it's not something that it's a sky is falling, flush it all out, get new people. No. Relax, okay? Relax. And it's the holiday season, so be happy. You know who's not happy? Notre Dame. And they're throwing a tantrum. Should they be? I don't think so. But we'll get to that and more as we talk about the college football playoff. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630, the sports capital.
If you are of a certain age, I would imagine you'd have to be at least late 50s to have any real recollection of this. But it was 45 years ago today that John Lennon was shot to death outside of the Dakota Apartments. But it's the reporting of the story and how America learned of it that illustrates how the flow of communication is so much different 45 years later. It was Howard Cosell who announced to the nation that John Lennon had been killed while waiting for Frank Gifford to call a play, that he didn't want to interrupt the flow of the Monday Night Football game for earth-shattering news, and we'll relive that coming up in the next hour. It's really a remarkable look at how things were reported in those days versus today, where it would have hit Twitter instantly and everything would have gone kablooey. But in a much different time, in a different century, things were reported in a much different way, and we'll get to that coming up. All right, a lot of kvetching coming from Notre Dame. We lost our first two games, but that was early in the season. Miami got in. Yeah, we lost to Miami. So what? No. That's not the way it works. So the field of 12 was officially announced yesterday, and some of them we obviously knew. And look, I in the college football playoff era, BCS, whatever, the college football team that I've rooted for is Maryland over the years, and I've understood that likely Maryland is never going to have an opportunity to play for a national championship. Now, you could say, well, look at Indiana, and I will look at Indiana because Indiana is near and dear to my heart. I paid that school a lot of money. My son graduated from Indiana in 2013, loved it there, has some great friends there, and is actually meeting up with them at the Rose Bowl when, incredibly, Indiana will play for a chance to get to the semifinals and possibly the national championship game. And just to give you a snapshot of how unlikely that is, this is really, when I think about this, it's mind-blowing. When he began his freshman year, when I took him to school in 2009, he needed some things for his dorm, so we went to, and this tells you how long ago that was, to Sears to buy some supplies, sheets, whatever else he needed. I forget what it was, but we went to Sears, and somebody was helping us, and he said, "Oh, Indiana student." I said, "Yes, he's beginning his freshman year," and this is August, right? And when you go on a college campus with a Big Ten football team in August, you're talking about football. No. He wanted to talk about basketball, which really wasn't even that good then. That was after Kelvin Sampson had been run out for, again, a quaint violation, sending too many texts to players. So it was the Tom Crean era, and they weren't good. They had Doc Rivers' other son, I think his name was Isaiah, who didn't play in the NBA, and a few other guys, and they weren't good. But this gentleman who was helping us at Sears, he wanted to talk Indiana basketball because it's basketball at Indiana and everything else. And I remember going to visit Jeremy at school. We went to, I think, a couple of games, and they were Big Ten games. And they have a great tailgate across the street from the stadium. Great tailgate. And then most of the kids in those days went back to their dorm and went to sleep. But we went to the game, and we probably only went to the game because I was there. And I think they lost both times. One of them was to Illinois, and I forget what the other game was. But the place was half empty. They didn't care. They didn't care about Indiana football. And over the years, Jeremy just skipped a number of games, big games like Penn State games. And he was into the basketball, and he got the great thrill of Christian Watford hitting a shot at the buzzer to beat number 1 and undefeated Kentucky. He got that one shining moment, and he had a team that made it to the Sweet 16 or 2 Sweet 16s. One of them he was in, New Zealand, Australia at that time for the first one. But the point I'm making is that Indiana football was nowhere. And I believe it was his sophomore year, they had a home game scheduled against Penn State. And they knew they weren't going to get the gate that they wanted, so they sold the game to Penn State for $3 million. Penn State played the game at FedEx Field, and it was supposed to be a home game for Indiana. I think they wore their dark uniforms, but the place was filled with Penn State. And they knew it. They were selling Big Ten games because they couldn't put people in the stands. And now they are the number 1 team in the land, the only undefeated team left, and they have the number 1 seed and will play in the Rose Bowl, which will be, as it always is, it is always on January the 1st, and that'd be 4 o'clock Eastern time. They used to start at 5, now it's 4, and they will play the winner of Alabama and Oklahoma. And to think that Indiana, which had the most losses in college football history before Curt Cignetti arrived, to be in this position and to have knocked off Ohio State, it's not that far away from Herb Brooks and the Miracle on Ice, because Ohio State to college football may be pretty close to what the Russians were to international hockey in 1980. It's stunning when you think about this. Now, the NIL has changed a lot of things and the transfer portal, but remember, Curt Cignetti's coming from James Madison. It wasn't that long ago that they were playing in what they call FCS. The big boys are FBS. They moved up to FBS, but who's worried about players coming in from James Madison to transform your program? But look at what they've done. It's absolutely incredible. It's one of the biggest stories in the history of college football. So they have the number 1 seed. They will have the first round bye. And then we start the games rolling on the 19th when Alabama plays at Oklahoma. That'll be an 8 o'clock game Friday night. Then following day, Saturday, Miami at Texas A&M, Tulane at Ole Miss, and James Madison at Oregon. And they've got the Cinderella factor in here with James Madison making it. But I don't think, I mean, I could be wrong, but I don't think you're going to see, like Ali Farouk Manesh hitting a jumper at the buzzer to give the little boys a win. And that's diminished too in the NCAA tournament too because of the transfer portal. All the smaller schools are getting taken for their best players, so they don't have much. They don't have the level of talent that the big schools have now. So what I'm looking at could be some ugly games. Even Miami and Texas A&M. I mean, Texas A&M, before they blew it against Texas, would have been a top 4 seed in a first round bye. That could be an ugly game. Ole Miss, even with the change of Lane Kiffin, could easily blow out Tulane, and I don't give really James Madison a puncher's chance. Best game could be Alabama and Oklahoma, and the winner of that will go play Indiana in the Rose Bowl. Then they start the quarterfinals, New Year's Eve, Cotton Bowl, Miami or Texas A&M against Ohio State. Then the Orange Bowl, James Madison or Oregon, most likely Oregon, against Texas Tech, which actually could be a very good game because Texas Tech's defense looks very good. Rose Bowl, as I mentioned, Indiana against Alabama, Oklahoma. Sugar Bowl, Tulane or Ole Miss against Georgia. And then they get to the semifinals, which would be the Fiesta Bowl on Thursday, January 8th. And then the Peach Bowl on Friday the 9th, and the 2 winners will go play for the national championship in the Fiesta Bowl, which will be a Monday night game on January 19th. As for the schools that were left out, particularly Notre Dame, all the whining, we didn't get in. Well, again, it was you or Miami, and you lost to Miami. That's the way I see it. Paul Feinbaum covers college football for ESPN, working with Matt Barry yesterday. Their look at how the committee did.
Without a doubt. I mean, the only thing they got wrong was they tried to play games last week, as they always do on the next to the last rankings. They're fairly dishonest in that regard because they tease. Clearly, they were trying to protect Alabama. They must have felt that those people in the room, by blowing up Alabama, would have just sent a message that nobody really wants to deal with, and we'll deal with it for another day of the conference championship games. But ultimately, I as much as I would like to find outrage, Matt, we've talked about this for a couple of weeks. Miami should have been in over Notre Dame. Alabama was an unenthusiastic selection, but their body of work was pretty good. I mean, it just, if you're going to go that way, then if you're going to use the bonus championship weekend for something. Right. I think ultimately the reason why we're not going to deal with that is because there's so many other issues in college football. But on a day like today, these things look like real issues.
They do. But again, at the end of the day, you can't. I think the committee was charged with two things they couldn't afford to have happen. Number one, you can't punish a team for playing in a conference championship. I know BYU was saying, what about us? But they weren't ranked high enough anyway to feel concerned or feel safe. And two, you couldn't not make head-to-head a thing. And by that standard, by them not punishing Alabama and by them not punishing Miami, you could argue they got it right. Again, people are yelling about Tulane and JMU. That was never, ever, ever, ever going to change.
Yeah, that was part of the setup that they would allow if the ACC, kind of crapped the bed as they did with Virginia losing to Duke. You can't put a 5-loss Duke team in as your ACC representative. I'm sorry. That's not right. And you've got to reward teams like James Madison and Tulane who got it done during the season. So if your conference can't hold up its end of the bargain and send a representative that looks solid, then you move on. Now, you might argue this. I wouldn't. But if you're going to say, well, the conference championship game should not count against you, well, then might you have put Virginia in? I don't think so. I wouldn't put Virginia in against JMU, or I wouldn't put them in against Tulane, but that's part of it. Now, the Notre Dame, they've taken their ball and they've gone home because now that they've been left out, that they've been so insulted, even though they lost their first 2 games. Back in the old days, you would eliminate yourself sometimes in week 1 if you lost. But when they expanded the playoffs, okay, you can handle 2. But then the rest of the schedule, they played their tough games early. And the rest of the way, they didn't play anybody really tough. They're playing teams like Navy the rest of the way. That's what you do as an independent. And you picked up the ACC schedule. Well, it was a down year for the ACC. Clemson, which is almost always good, stunk this year. But that's the cards you're dealt as an independent. And I agree 100% with what Paul Feinbaum says about the Notre Dame fan base.
Just shut up already, Notre Dame fans. I mean, you haven't done anything this year. You've got a really good team. You played 2 very meaningful games at the beginning of the year, one at home, one on the road. You lost both. What's your best win? Southern Cal, whatever. You're afraid to play in a conference because you want to take the money and run. That's your fault. If you're sitting at 12:30 today on the outside, that's your problem. It's not ours.
Yeah, I mean it's a question of money. You want to be in a conference? ACC, be happy to have you. You play an ACC schedule. Oh, you'd like all the money that you get from NBC. Well, okay, then. That's part of the deal. Could you have helped yourself with a conference championship game? Yeah, probably. If you blow the doors off Virginia, you're in. But you're not in the ACC. You just want the ACC schedule to fill up your dance card there. And that's the breaks of the game. The other part of this is they lose out on even more money because when you make it into the college football playoff, each team, your conference gets $4 million for each team that they place in the first round. Well, Notre Dame as an independent wouldn't have to share it with the conference. They would get all $4 million. They didn't get it, so they say, well, we're not going to help ESPN because ESPN screwed us, so we're not going to play a bowl game. Season over. And here's the other issue here that college football is facing. It's not just Notre Dame getting in the snit and walking away. there are other schools who have said, yeah, we're not playing the bowl game either. And a couple of them are like, who? One of them is Rutgers. Who the hell is Rutgers to say we're not playing in a bowl game? Rutgers. Nah, we're not going to do it. UCF used to be considered a mid-major, maybe still is. They're out. Kansas State's not in it. Iowa State lost their coach to Penn State, so they could have an interim, but no, they're not going to play in a bowl game. And Baylor, Robert Griffin's alma mater, won a Heisman Trophy there, not participating in the bowl games. And there's a couple of reasons that this kind of makes sense. One is, as we all have seen over the years, that you got players who are getting ready to transfer, so they don't want to get injured playing in a bowl game. You got players who are trying to get ready for the NFL. They don't want to risk injury playing in the Pop-Tarts Bowl or whatever they go to, the Mayonnaise Bowl. And so they're opting out, so players aren't playing. What's even worse for the schools, because it used to be looked at, it's an extra week of extra couple of weeks of getting ready for the game and practicing and playing the game. We can look at more players. Well, by the time all the transfers to be check out and all the guys that are headed to the NFL check out, then you're looking at prospects who can be poached by other schools. So they don't want to put them on display. These are guys who maybe haven't played a lot during the year because the guys who are opting out, took all their playing time. Do they want to put a guy on the field who may show some promise in Alabama or Penn State or Virginia Tech, whatever? They may look, we'll take one of those. So the whole bowl thing is really beginning to, it's not going to unravel because there's too much damn money in it. But you look at where things stand right now with not just players saying, I don't want any part of that. Teams saying they don't want to. Who the hell is Rutgers to say we don't want to play in a bowl game? Who the hell are they? Nah, forget about it. And that's what college football is facing. And, it could get to the tipping point. Maybe we're not quite there yet. But what ultimately has to happen, because it is professional football, and Notre Dame in their ridiculous statement about why they're pulling out, they used the term student athletes. Stop. They're no more student athletes. These are paid professionals. And what you have to do is you have to have contracts, and they have to abide by the terms of the contract. And that may even include playing in a bowl game. If it's a 2-year deal and it's the last part of your 2-year deal that you play in a bowl game, you play. Now, you want to make it more ridiculous? You go in the game and you run one play. Oh, my arm hurts. Oh, my hamstring hurts. Maybe you can do that. But look, this is where we're at right now in college football. And the reason we're here is because the NCAA, which barely exists anyway, spent all its money and all its time in court saying, no, we can't pay the players. And the Supreme Court went, no, that's slavery. If you make millions and millions of dollars from television and you put these players on, and they don't get any money. And that's when everything just, went to the wild, wild west. If you don't have any rule structure in place, this is what you have. You have coaches leaving, coaches negotiating new deals during the season. Is there anything crazier than James Franklin taking Penn State into the season as the number one team in the country, losing 3 straight games, losing his job, and then getting another job before the end of the regular season at Virginia Tech, where he is all set when recruiting day starts, where all the players many of the players, if not most of the players who were going to sign with him at Penn State, have now followed him to Virginia Tech, and Penn State, which didn't have a coach left, they went, but what are we going to do about players? This is the state of college football. So Notre Dame, too bad. As Paul Feinbaum said, stop whining. You made this bed, you sleep in it. All right, coming up in the next hour, more on the Commanders' ugly loss yesterday, and Vince Wilfork on South Beach Sessions with Dan Le Batard. Interesting things to say. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630. 2024, a December to remember. 2025, oy vey, this is bad. And if they lose on Sunday at New York, and they're underdogs there, can you believe a 12-game losing streak to end the season? The last team they beat The Raiders, who absolutely stink, won what you might call a quality win all year. That was against the Chargers, who are going to play tonight against Philadelphia. This is just hard to get your head around. There might have been a swinging back of the pendulum this year, but not like this. This is really incredible. There's no other way to say this. I mean, yeah, you can rip Adam Peters all you want. And I'm seeing on Twitter, he stinks. Get him out of here. Dan Quinn, he had his year. Goodbye. Goodbye, Jane Daniel. I saw RG4. Okay, I've said this a number of times. Yes, there is concern now about Jaden Daniels, and I urge you to read Barry Berluga's column in the Post today. He was in Minneapolis yesterday, and his take is, yeah, he's still the franchise guy, but, it's not real good right now. It's kind of like the season that Jaden Daniels is having in between all the injuries that he's had, and this is the fourth game that he's been knocked out of this year, although he could have come back. I think that's another part of the story yesterday, too, that he was cleared to return to the game, and Dan Quinn elected to keep him out. Now, you could say that's more because of the big scare they got in the Seattle game and how foolish it was to keep him in the blowout where it was at that point. But you could also say that he sort of got benched yesterday. And that's probably as much a concern as anything, that the guy who was setting the world on fire last year was taken out of a game that was conceivably winnable. Now, the eye test told you it wasn't winnable, but it was only 14-0 when he left the game, and he did something which he's got to learn not to do. He threw an interception to Andrew Van Ginkel and decided to chase him down, got knocked down, and banged up the elbow again and left the game. But those are the kind of things that he's got to learn, which is why I'm still in favor, even with this latest injury. I'm still in favor of him playing as much as he can over these last 4 games, because it's still about a developmental situation. And Dan Quinn, addressed that. As a matter of fact, let me play this again. This was played this in the 10 o'clock hour, but this is about why you would want to play Jaden Daniels in these last 4 games in a season which he's been completely. This is only his 7th appearance of the season yesterday, and he has not shown an ability to stay healthy.
It's an important development time for him. Like, there's no zero risk game. We try to manage that, but for the development point of it, it's important. It was my decision to sit him. I just felt we didn't hit our space to be close like we wanted to be. I thought he had a really good, week, 2 weeks really practice, John, and so having the guys come back, I felt like, all right, this is another chance to take another step forward. And so when we didn't today as a team, I think all of that was a contributing factor, not one position or one play.
So essentially, Quinn was looking for momentum in a lost season, a season that was already down the tubes. They had a minuscule chance of making the playoffs going into yesterday, and of course that's now officially gone. But what he was banking on was, and again, no medals for trying, no such thing as taking consolation in a loss, but he felt like the way they competed against Denver, that would carry over into this week against a struggling team, a Minnesota team that had been shut out. True that J.J. McCarthy wasn't playing, but McCarthy wasn't playing well. McCarthy's stats suggest that he was going to be one of the big quarterback busts of this century, going back to 2000, and he looked Mahomes-ish yesterday, if that's a word. Again, the numbers for him, not a lot of passing yardage, didn't need it. 16 of 23 for 163 yards, 3 touchdowns, and a passer rating of 129.2. That's real good. But the momentum that they were looking for, where Dan Quinn gets up and says, we lost, but we're not lost anymore, that has now been lost again. Here's Terry McLaurin.
I think momentum is real, but at the same time, if you don't come out and execute, you could lose to anybody. And just because we played 5 quarters of really solid football doesn't guarantee we want to come out here and do it this week. We had a really good excuse me. We had a really good week of practice, but it just didn't translate this week. And when you have turnovers, when we don't create any turnovers, when we keep our defense on the field for forever and we go 3 and out, like it's kind of tough. So we just got to find a way to flip that script going into next week. But I think it's fair, that he said we took some steps forward last week, but we took some steps back this week. And I think that's honest. We all got to own that.
3 and outs. The time of possession for Minnesota, 10 minutes more than Washington in this game. 10 minutes, 35-25. The penalties, which have been a problem, not a problem for either team yesterday. You really can't whine about the penalties, but you lose the turnover battle 3-0. You almost never win a game, almost never. Last 4 games in the season where Terry McLaurin told everybody, "Hey, I never get hurt. I didn't get hurt in 5 years." He's now been in and out of the lineup twice with injuries for a team that's all too familiar for him with his first 5 years with the organization, because last year was number 6. They did make the playoffs in his second year, but that was with a losing record. He's been playing out the string a lot of times over the years, and he's about to do it again.
We still got our division games left. Just try to take it one at a time. We got a Giants team who throws the records when you come to division games, so we got to go on the road and do a lot better than we did today. Take care of football, sustain the drives offensively, creating turnovers, helping defense get off the field, all those things. We just didn't play any complimentary football today. That was the result when you have a good team up there.
So now Dan Quinn's got a week where he's got to get his team back up for a 4-game stretch, which is essentially meaningless. And just from the tone of his voice, man, you can hear the exhaustion in it.
It's a lot emotionally, I would say. Just because, like last week, they were, what else do I, where do we get over the hump? And I said, you keep working, you keep going. And so in some regards, tonight's harder. Tonight's harder because when you're that flat, did you leave it all on the table and you didn't fill the tank back up to go? And that's our job, is to find a way to go do that and stand strong again. And so I just felt like we were fighting off our back foot. It felt like in all phases, just not aggressive enough, not downhill enough. And I'll give credit, like I said, Flo and Kev both, I thought called good games. And so, but it felt like that, not as aggressive as we needed to be in all phases.
Yeah. I would say that's an understatement when you get shut out. Again, shutouts almost never happen in this league. Sooner or later, you'll get in a position to get a field goal, and they'll just kick it, even if it's a blowout game, just so you don't have a shutout. And so this was the first one since 2019 when they were shut out by the 49ers, and it was a rainy day, and the team was bad. That was the last year. It might have been – I have to check the schedule, but it might have been after Jay Gruden was fired. There was a dead season walking at that point. They got shut out by the 49ers. They did. The time before that was the best year that Joe Gibbs had in his second go-round when they made it to the second round of the playoffs. But during that season, they played the Giants in New York and lost 36-0. This is more, I think, typical of the season than that game was, obviously, since they I think they won their last 5. In that year, I think that's the year, 2005, they won their last 5 and won a playoff game in Tampa and then ended their season in Seattle. This year, it just got away from them, and here's where they are. They're looking at a draft position which could – there's so many bad teams this year. I was really surprised looking at this, but there is the first pick in play, and that would be important for a team – that is really quarterback hungry, which may trade up and because they don't have a lot of draft picks. They've traded them away in some Marshawn Lattimore deal and the Tunsil deal. So they're looking for draft picks, and this would be very valuable if they can get to number 1. I say if they can get to. Here's what they're looking at right now. They are currently in the 6th spot at 3-10. But there are 4 other teams that are 3-10 now. Cleveland's 3-10, New Orleans 3-10. That's after beating Tampa Bay yesterday, which was a big surprise. Jets, of course, are 3-10. They're always 3-10. Arizona is 3-10, and they're through with Kyler Murray. They've sat him down for the rest of the year. And then the teams that are so quote unquote in front of them. And I guess this is really the toilet bowl here coming up this week with a chance to really move up. They play the Giants, who currently hold the number 1 spot at 2-11. They may have found their guy in Jackson Dart, so they also, if they wind up with the number 1 pick, may be looking to deal it as well. You got Vegas at 2-11. I think that Pete Carroll's going to be one and done there. They stink. And Tennessee, they have a team that's clearly rebuilding, and they have the quarterback who's in his rookie year and struggling. They're 2-11. So you've got, 5. You got 8 teams that are 3-10 or worse. That's not good. That the balance that they always want to have in the NFL. This is not a good year for that. And I think that if you look at where the Commanders are and whether they can rebound next year to get at least close to where they were last year, a lot is going to depend on what Adam Peters does in the offseason. And you also got to hope that the offseason is spent by Jaden Daniels examining what he did this year. Last year was a little bit different. He learned a lot about playing the position, but now he's got to learn to stay in the game to keep that position. And that is, chasing down almost a linebacker-sized safety after an interception. While you may be able to catch him, you don't want to tackle him. So preserve yourself that way. In a blowout game, you want to hand off, and you don't want to have a chance of dislocating your elbow. The other injuries happen, and they happen to quarterbacks, but he rebounded from those, fairly quickly. But that's really what the offseason is going to have to be about for him. This was fun last week. Bruce Arians is promoting a Netflix, it's a Prime series called Raise the Flag, and it's the history of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And they were the only team to go 0-14. They went 0-14 their first year, and they went 0-12 their second year before winning 2 games. So they lost their first 26 games as a franchise and have now won 2 Super Bowls, the second with Tom Brady at quarterback. And Bruce Arians was the coach. And when he was on this past, I think it was Friday, to talk to Rich Eisen about promoting the series Raise the Flag, they talked about landing Tom Brady and how that all came together for Tampa in 2020.
I think Tampa had everything he was looking for. He wanted to stay on the East Coast, close to Jack and his son, and obviously he was building a house in Florida at the time, and so everything worked out. Plus we had Mike Evans and Chris Godwin, and we were fortunate to trade for Gronk and got all the pieces. He knew everything about our football team and how close we were.
Well, I mean, listen, though, bottom line, obviously that helps, but he had to trust you. And you obviously knowing the situation he had come from, hard coaching. I mean, Bill as much as anybody else. So what do you think about you and him that worked out, do you think?
Yeah, it was so different for him to hear it from a head coach offensive mind versus a head coach defensive mind, and one that's a little more no risk it, no biscuit than Bill was. So, that part took a little time and growing used to, but he was looking forward to it. And, it's the philosophy of, hey, there's a minute left and there's 2 timeouts. We're gonna just run it out right at halftime. I said, hell no, brother, we're going for points, man. That's what we do. And it took a little time, but that was the year we had no OTAs and no preseason games, and it was crazy.
Yeah, I know that was the COVID era. Walk me through though, where you had to give a little bit to Tom, that you had to sit down maybe for a split second and go, do I really want to do this? And heck yeah, it's Tom Brady. Was there a moment like that for you, Bruce?
No. Once we made the decision that he could still do it at a very, very, very high level. And we weren't really unsold on Jameis Winston. We figured we could correct some of the mistakes he was making. He did throw for 5,000 yards and 36 touchdowns. And Byron Leftwich just did an unbelievable job that year with Jameis. And then, for Tom, it was, hey, I know your offense. I've been in it. You're very, very smart. It's a difficult one to learn for 21 other guys. How about you just learn ours? He was, oh yeah, coach, that's not a problem. It's just terminology and how he read things out, how he wanted routes run, and you meet in the middle with all that kind of stuff.
Well, and you got a good story of during a timeout where you and Tom got together, hashed something out, and then it turned into something big and successful for your Super Bowl team. Yeah. Bruce, you got a good one?
Yeah, right. I think it was about maybe a minute and 15, maybe a minute and 20 right before half, and we had to lead in the Super Bowl. And Tom comes over, you got 80 yards to go, and hey, we're just gonna take it real easy, right? Because I said, heck no, man. We're gonna be very smart with the ball. But when you get a shot to Mike, take it. And, of course, he takes a Mike shot and gets a PI, gets another PI, and we get a touchdown. And, it's like that one and the one up in Green Bay with about 6 seconds left. I got pissed off, called timeout. We ain't punting. And Byron Leftwich called a jewel. And Tom looked at him and said, this is going to work, man. They're going to squat on it. And he throws that touchdown to Scotty Miller up in Green Bay right before the half. So I think the half of both of those games determined those games.
Wow, that was a holy S moment for me, Bruce, to be honest with you. That Scotty Miller play. For me, where I'm sitting there going, this, because the entire season, I'm sitting there saying, I can't believe that Tom's going to be in a new spot for the first time. And this had nothing to do with you, the team, everything. I just couldn't imagine that Brady would finally go to a new spot and it would work out to the ultimate in his first shot at it. And I was always sitting there going, there's got to be some moment where this turns back into a pumpkin, And then he had that moment with Scotty Miller against the Packers. And I'm like, holy S, like this is actually going to happen, that they're going to make the Super Bowl here. And then all bets would be off, certainly playing in Raymond James, despite it taking on the Chiefs. Bruce, I'm wondering if that happened for you too at that point.
Yeah, leading the whole week leading up to the game, Rich, in Green Bay, they're hanging all the Super Bowl banners and stuff in the stadium, and say, "Hey, boys, you better not be looking at that stuff because we'll get our ass kicked up in Green Bay if you're looking over there worrying about the Super Bowl. Hey, we got the championship game to win first, so don't be looking over there and getting ahead of yourself." And that team was so grounded. We had such great leadership on it, and the offense, defense, special teams, the whole crew. And that game in Green Bay, I think just something about winning at Lambeau is so unique and so cool.
Yeah, I didn't even think of that. So, because the preps for the Super Bowl, they have to change the stadium around. And certainly if you're not hosting the NFC Championship game, so they can get in nice and early. So and your facilities are right there. It's not like, again, the Rams in SoFi that they practice, Southern California. They might as well be in Vermont, you know what I mean, compared to where they play the games. So you had to have your guys would be walking around seeing the preps for the Super Bowl before taking on Green Bay. That actually happened. Huh?
Yeah, all our meetings were outside. We ate outside. Right. We did have a huge advantage being in Florida that
sure
the ownership built us all the facilities we needed outside. And we're standing there just looking straight over there. All I see is Super Bowl banners, and they're hanging stuff, and the trucks are going down the street like, whoa, just don't get ahead of ourselves here, boys.
Yeah. Like, don't pay attention to that you can make and play in your own stadium. And I just remember, right, exactly. And I remember on game day morning when we did the pregame show in that stadium, and there were the cardboard cutouts that they were putting in chairs, in seats, and it was really wild, to be honest. But anyway, long story short is Michael Irvin sat on the set and said, there is no way the Bucs are losing this game. And I'm like, all right, why? And he's like, there's no way. He goes, if I was on this team, I would say there is no way we're going to let anybody come on our field and have the ultimate victory against us. I will never set foot on this field without thinking about that, and I will refuse to allow that to happen. I'm wondering if that was also a sensibility your team had for that game, Bruce.
I'm not a big speech giver.
Yep.
And we rallied them up before the game, and I said what I wanted to say. Then Tom gave a hell of a speech, and it was short but right to the point about becoming legendary. And our guys, you could tell they were ready. I mean, and we got embarrassed by Kansas City earlier in the year, so it was a little bit of a payback too. And Todd Bowles' defensive game plan was outstanding. Byron Leftwich's game plan on offense to run the ball as well as we did was outstanding.
Yeah, that's Bruce Arians, who's part of this documentary series that's going to be on Prime, Raise the Flags, about the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, but that Super Bowl. And, when they're talking about the game being played on the home field of the Bucs for years, that was like Super Bowl 50-something, right, 5 years ago. So it was 55 or 54, whatever it was, that all those years, wouldn't it be really cool if the home team got to play a Super Bowl like a team got to play a Super Bowl in its home field. And we had that, but because of the COVID, it was just weird. They limited the crowd to 25,000. You heard Eisen reference the cardboard cutouts that they put in just to make it look like they had more people in the stands. And they had it. And then the following year, it happened again. The Rams played the Super Bowl on their home field. And it just sort of like blew by. And the next time it happened, it'll be, oh, yeah, they're playing on their home field. Now, we're going to have a Super Bowl here. I'll be long retired by the time it happens, but we're going to have a Super Bowl after they open the new stadium on the RFK site in 2030. It wouldn't be that year, which would be, February of 2031, but it could be 2032 or 2032 could be a Super Bowl in Washington. And, Jaden Daniels, if he stays healthy, would be on a second contract and maybe in his prime. Maybe it happens, maybe not. But in this case, you had an aging Tom Brady with one last hurrah with the Buccaneers, knocking off the young buck Patrick Mahomes, who had won the Super Bowl the year before against the 49ers. But Brady went, not so fast, my friend. I got one more. And just to put the exclamation point on my legacy, number 7 after delivering 6 in New England. Will anybody ever get 7 again? I don't know. Mahomes may, he may play long enough to do it. What does he have, 3? I think he's got 3 of them. So could happen, but 4 more is a lot more. That's more than twice as many as he has right now. All right, that's it for me. Bram is coming up next, and I'll see you back here tomorrow at 9 a.m.